I've never gone to an art school, yet I'm passionate about art, collages and ink work in particular, as much as I'm passionate about self-reflection and writing. So I challenged myself to sketch my life for 30 days straight and see what happens. By the way, I've never sketched from life before, and my drawing and painting experience is either doodling from my head or using references that I find online or in vintage books. In this video, I will honestly share the results, all the sketches that I've made, and in the second part, 4 biggest insights and 2 things I would do differently now, looking back. By the way, I'm Anna and I'm starting this channel to focus on building a personal art practice for self-exploration. And this is the sketchbook that contains 30 days of my life sketched. And I have set the following rules for myself. I used pen, watercolors, colored pencils, and collage. No graphite pencil and no eraser. Each day had a story and objects that belonged to just that time frame. Never sketched from yesterday's, just today's. With this challenge, I wanted to address my fear of drawing from life and not from references, my insecurities related to lacking academic knowledge of drawing, and the consequent fear of ugly drawing, so-called, and the overall procrastination and sticking to the old guns of the known. My intention was not to become a better artist, but to just have fun and experiment and explore my own art-making capacity. So let me show you what I have here. For the first couple of days, I did a weird placement of sketches on different pages instead of using the spread. So here is where I draw sofa and the weekend beer indulgence. I made a little note here saying that probably I shouldn't cover big areas with watercolor. It didn't look good and I recolored the sofa surface using a pencil. And here I tried to apply dots to add texture and volume to show the little beer bubbles, and it looks kind of sad and empty. After the first day, I've taken the decision to start this challenge and see what I can actually create. Day second. An Orthodox church here in Tbilisi, where I live at the moment. I sketched it from life on location, and it was my first attempt with buildings, and it's not the best one. And a spoiler, it's one of my weakest points as it turned out. I got too impatient and drew before I actually saw it in full detail. It was also super hot, and my husband was waiting for me on the bench. And here is the collage element, a cute cutout piece of a pastry wrap. The second sketch from this day is something absolutely out of place and random. Back then I still didn't understand what I was doing, and thus I did whatever. And it was fun. I drew a girl that kept staring at her phone in that little park, and then attached a cutout piece from a movie theater ticket. That day we went to see Mission Impossible. Then I added different stuff to Tom Cruise, including the tea bag for some reason. But it was fun, I was just experimenting. Day 3 was an experiment too. I wanted to save the memory of a little dry rose bouquet, so I depicted it using pen and watercolor, and then glued some real dried rose petals using simple white glue. That day I didn't leave the apartment and drew my camera. 2 collaged circles here were meant to echo the lens cover, and I like these kind of geometrical rhymes. This was the first time when I took a photo and then drew it back home. It was too hot to sit outside, and further on I used this trick for most sketches. In the second part of the video, I'll give more insights about why I see this trick is better than I used to think before. This is a small neighborhood park. I got a bit crazy with painting greenery, and I still struggle with it. On the same day I drew birds that I've spotted in the same park, I finally dealt with the spread, and for the first time in this challenge, I actually liked the feel and the look of the sketches. We live on the outskirts of Tbilisi, and the surroundings here are not necessarily eye-pleasing, except for the mountains, of course. Yet they are very curious. So I drew an old kiosk with two chairs that barely hold together. Usually they are taken by old Georgian men having a chat, and I caught the sight of one of such dudes with a plastic bag and a typical block of flats with clothes hanging dry outside. I will capture this feature more than once. And here I loved the effect of putting together several separated elements into one frame. It felt a little bit like a comic strip. I drew the view out of the window with a little bulb on solar batteries that we have here, me holding a book that I was reading at that moment, and then I decided to add a little excerpt from the book because I thought it would be interesting to remember what caught my interest on that day. I've become more fearless with using watercolors on this paper. And if I haven't mentioned it before, this sketchbook that I'm using is Art Creations by Talents, and I love it absolutely. After trying it, I cannot use clear white paper anymore because it feels too aggressive for me, while this cream colored is just perfect. A collection of random objects. I know there is no composition here, I just threw everything together, but honestly I don't care. For me it was just like making a movie for the future me to watch. As I'm a full-time creator of video content, I have another channel on YouTube and a Patreon community. I tend to see frames, noticing details and presenting them in a sequence, but not arranging properly in compositions. I'm very much interested in practicing more outside of my box of habits, but later. And it's the first and only scene from the subway, another dilapidated kiosk with some Georgian inscription, and a tree, obviously, and three collage objects from a vintage Soviet encyclopedia. I attempted to use them to bring all the elements at least a little bit together to create a coherent look. This was the first day when I discovered the therapeutic effect of drawing messy, crowded lines. It felt like I was releasing my messy, crowded emotions, or just a vague darkness of uncertainty. And it made me think that darkness surrounding objects makes them shine brighter. And probably the same is for real life, like dark moments and dark thoughts make the good ones really stand out. It's cheesy, I'm quite aware, but it was just a good reminder. Besides, I enjoyed having a limited palette. I used just one granulating red color and a mix for the skin, and I added it here as well. A weekend day out. My husband and I had a beautiful rainy walk in the downtown and then hopped in a beer restaurant that is called Ori Tona or Two Tons, where they serve the most delicious khinkali. It's a traditional dumplings. They are here. And here I wrote down which exact types of khinkali I had. It was with mushrooms and with potatoes. Yeah. I attempted to maintain a perspective and composition, yet Brian, my husband, turned out a bit unlike himself, but it was fun. At least this partial portrait made him smile. Here I definitely began to feel more loose and not so scared of drawing something I wouldn't be proud of. The fear is deeply ingrained in many people, me including, although I always thought I'm more or less free from it, but I'm not. Pigeons bathing in a dirty pool, and yet another typical block of flats. Here I let myself embrace the empty space and leave the spread not crowded with things. Further on, I will forget this realization, but I'm reminding me of it again. I love the looseness of these pigeons. In a book about drawing that I'm reading now, the author says that when we use a pen and watercolors, for example, or any kind of paint in the form of a blurb, I'm not sure how it is in English, I'm sorry. These two elements shouldn't duplicate each other. They shouldn't follow each other precisely, but they have to complement in a wholesome way. So I didn't follow this tip with the building though. So it's kind of, I'm repeating with watercolors, I'm following all the lines, but I'm pretty proud with the pigeons. Yet another evidence of my struggle with greenery. I sketched the view of the mountains outside, but then it suddenly reminded me of a stylized plastic bottle filled with a landscape instead of soda or water, and then I added a cap to support this metaphor. And then I decided to draw a lovely little spiculette that I've seen outside on that day. I acknowledge that I want to figure out a more satisfying way to draw trees and bushes, yet I still enjoyed this session a lot. This was one of the most fun drawing sessions, as I attempted to depict a monument from the back to make it easier, and I also played with drawing the shadow of me. I could have done it without the pen outline. I think it would look much better, but it still doesn't matter after all. Interestingly, this is the monument to a Soviet poet Vladimir Mayakovsky, and he will be featured further on in this sketchbook. I love such coincidences, and the sketch journal helped me process them deeper, and you will see what I mean. A dark, windy day when I didn't feel optimistic, as you can tell from the chosen colors and the objects themselves. Iconic, gloomy blocks of flats and a tree with someone's clothes caught in the branches. Probably they were air-dried on a balcony and then carried away by the wind. I thought it was dramatic and fitted my mood perfectly, random and lost. I do believe that honesty in acknowledging your feelings and experiences is key to being present in your own life. It's often not as easy as it might seem though, and that's where art helps. A very disorganized composition. I stayed at home all day again, and there's a cute Moomin cup with blueberries, which I've eaten a lot, some collaged flowers from the vintage Soviet encyclopedia, and this was meant to be a lamp in the living room, but I decided to add a reptile eye to it. By this day, I got a bit tired from the challenge of sketching every day, but still made an effort to continue. It's the first time when I used pure yellow, and it felt very therapeutic, thanks to its soothing lightness. This was a weekend day when my husband and I got to visit a different apartment with very interesting paintings on the walls. I wanted to depict them, as well as the lamp and a coffee cup from a Swedish cafe that we went to on that day. It was fun to sketch actual paintings and see how they get translated through my own lines and colors. I repeated the same trick on the next day, another painting, a cup of tea, and another appearance of the Soviet poet that I mentioned before, Vladimir Mayakovsky. Very randomly, I encountered one book from an 8-volume full collection of his poems published in 1968. It is the exact collection that my grandparents had in their cottage in a small Siberian village. When I was little, I would read it when I had breakfast. It was my ritual, and I still remembered all the drawings and poems from there, this volume in particular. So I drew a character of one poem and wrote down a few lines from it. It was a nice travel back in time. My favorite use of collaged pieces, when it's not just a cut-out flower glued to paper, but a created shape. I turned one picture with a forest landscape into a roof and another picture into a pastry that I bought from a local bakery. This very bakery, named Entree, and this is its name in Georgian, I loved trying to replicate the fonts. And another food-related picture is me holding a bottle of juice from a local juice and sandwich shop. It was something berry mix, as far as I remember. Once again, I used the messy, crowded line technique to add some alternative kind of movement. This was the day of daisies. I happened to get a huge bouquet of daisies and it was a very funny story, so I wanted to save the memory of it. Drawing flower petals always feels so meditative, and I've chosen a flower that looked defected. Its central part was not ideally yellow, it has some dry gray spots and lacked a few petals, and I thought that it was beautiful. And here I traced my hand using the pen and then collaged it. The picture was again from a vintage book, one of the few that I have at the moment. I really love the combination of textures, crumpled paper and then the smooth collage element. It looks abstract, but in fact it's puff pastries that I've baked with apple and blueberry fillings. It was one of those very loose and relaxed sketches that add a quiet sense of presence in the moment. And I remember the pastries and that feeling in such vivid detail. This was an artsy and experimental session. I drew a painting by Nico Pirosmani, my favorite Georgian artist. His works always make me smile. They are pure, naive, and filled with joy. That day was very joyful for me as I went to one of the most gorgeous museums in Tbilisi. I added a very vivid lion's head from a local bridge sculpture and a building that I struggled drawing. I wanted to support the day's palette that was blue and rust, and thus I threw in some collaged elements, random legs and random shapes. Among other things, I wanted this challenge to be a chronicle of this summer spent in Tbilisi, as soon I will leave this place. This was the day when I didn't feel like sketching at all, so I decided to make a spread of the early dusk sky with wires and swallows. Here I experimented with a self-portrait collage. I made a selfie, printed it out, and traced element by element to create a recognizable silhouette. It was fun, and I've never done this before. Tracing paper came in very handy. I also used a simple yet good-looking collage technique when you cut the picture in stripes and then glue them at a certain distance from each other. Food is definitely one of the most satisfying sketching themes. I had a Beyond Meat burger and fries. I don't get those often, but they were pretty good and made a great still life. My favorite part here was to draw sesame seeds here And for that I used regular black micron pen and the white gel pen. The background was an imaginary pattern, and I thought that this color will go well with the food palette. On the next day there was a junk food counterweight with a healthy bowl. There was broccoli, sweet potatoes, they're here, a ton of chickpeas, quinoa, which is here, and lemon, of course. I felt tired and did it in a super loose manner. Again, used white gel pen for quinoa detail. A nostalgic sketching where I drew a vintage doll seen on a flea market near our neighborhood and a vintage whisk. It's exactly the same as my mom had when I was little, and she taught me how to use it. And the building was just a random one seen on the walk, and for the first time ever I tried using stencil to add star elements with watercolor. It was a fun experiment, and I also added some texture with golden colored gel pen. I think it's the worst sketching memory. I felt very emotionally destabilized and couldn't put myself together to create something meaningful and also more or less beautiful. On that day I saw something I didn't want to see, which is a very common thing here. I just don't want to say exactly what it was, but it causes a lot of emotional discomfort for me. So unfortunately I will remember that day even more, because that's what I was thinking while I was drawing. A seed of some plant and an empty husk as a metaphor. Sketching can be a form of art therapy when through the lines and colors you let go of inner tension and challenging emotions, but sometimes it just creates unwanted memories that, after all, also have a place in life. Another expression of emotional tension. I sketched myself standing in front of the wall, and the collaged elements were meant to be external stimuli that were neither awaited nor welcomed. But at least the fact that I sketched myself from the back made it easier for me to, at least a little bit, get out of my own head and give myself a break. One of my favorite and most satisfying sketches of the whole challenge. I used just one watercolor shade and very simple objects, a lamp, a tea kettle, and my feet in knitted socks that I've just finished. I sketched it in the evening and the sun was already down, and hence the chosen color rhymed so well with the time of the day. My shadows are not perfect here, and anyways, I didn't strive for utter realism. Over-focusing kills momentum, at least for me. I couldn't decide what to sketch. I was feeling a bit burnt out from the challenge, if I'm honest, so I decided to follow the easiest path and use the idea that has already proven to be very satisfying. I repeated the apple sketch from the earlier day of the challenge, but this time with tomatoes and without my hand holding one of the tomatoes. It was quick, fun, and yet once again very therapeutic thanks to the messy lines. And the final day. I wanted to make it the best sketch of the whole challenge, but for me it didn't turn out like that. I sketched a company of two Turkish bagels called simits that were bought in a small bakery, a window with plants and a piece of clothing hanging dry, and a piece of wall decoration that I've seen in the metro station. I managed to photograph it a second before the train arrived. And my hands as a symbol of embracing this experience and owning it in the best sense possible. Lack of academic drawing can be an advantage. The best outcome of this challenge is that I've killed the fear of ugly drawing and proved to myself that I don't have to know all the academic drawing intricacies to enjoy the process and to create something that I really like. Of course, I see where I need more practice. For example, I need to master drawing geometric objects from different angles, such as buildings, and I need to figure out a more interesting way to draw and paint greenery, such as trees and bushes and grass, and drawing people, of course. But I'm not obsessed with it. I'm not hyper focused on learning the basics, because these can potentially kill all my excitement, and I'm quite aware of this. I am free to decide whether I want to dive deeper into that or not. A person doesn't need to be a chef to know how to cook tasty food, and just like that, a person doesn't have to be a trained professional artist to enjoy making art. And I think it was the absence of academic knowledge that made me so amazed what I can do just for fun and not for getting good marks or acknowledgement or sales. Sketching every day is fun as a short-term challenge, but for a longer term, balance is needed. Overdoing it can result in burnout and a passion becoming an obligation. There were at least 3 or 4 days during the challenge when I didn't feel like drawing, sketching at all, and I had to force myself to do that. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily felt better after I forced myself and did it. No, I believe that certain days are made for observation only, not for creating something. Sketching from life is definitely underrated. Documenting the ordinary creates extraordinary and very vivid memories. A bird seen on your walk to the grocery store can be more interesting to draw than some random Pinterest reference. We often think that our life is nothing special, there is nothing to depict in there, but it's an oversimplification. Using photographs doesn't deteriorate or diminish the experience of drawing from life. The sense of presence in the moment doesn't disappear, it lasts. But you just feel more relaxed and you don't rush the process. And now, 2 things that I would do differently. I would have a more limited color palette. Now I have all sorts of watercolors of different shades. It's not a huge collection, but it's quite big, at least for me, in my understanding. And the days of the challenge when I used just 1 shade or 2 gave me the best experience of experimenting. This sort of limitation expands the creativity, and I will explore this more, maybe in further videos I will develop this thought, but yeah, limited color palette makes a big difference. Less overthinking and over-detailing. Nothing makes you and the sketch more miserable than torturing it with excessive details and indecisive lines. I would be even more brave with my sketches if I started this challenge right now after I finished it. Fear kills many things, including the expressiveness of your own story. I'm done with this sketchbook. It still has a few blank pages here, maybe there are 5 or 6, and I'm just going to tear them out to use them in a different experimental challenge that I'm having now, and later on I will make a video about it too. So if you're interested, consider subscribing and keeping an eye on this channel. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, dear fellow creatives. I hope that you got inspired to sketch from your life. If yes, please let me know in the comments. And for now, this is it. I hope you have a good day and I will see you soon. Пока-пока.